All right, we are live, and today's topic will be going over self-defense and some of the best carry insurance companies out there. So, Clint, give us a rundown on who you are.
Well, my name is Clint Macro. I'm the founder of the Trigger Pressers Union. I'm also the co-administrator of National Train a Teacher Day, co-host of Meet the Pressers with my co-host Matt Mallory, and I'm also locally in Pennsylvania. I'm the president of Allegheny County Sportsman's League and the second vice president of Firearms Owners Against Crime, which is our state Second Amendment organization. As far as training goes, I'm a senior training counselor with the USCCA. I'm also a training counselor for NRA and a master trainer for National Muzzle Loading Rifle Association. And I teach quite a bit. That's kind of how I make my living. I have this recording studio here, which has been traditionally my vocation, but in the last 10 years, I've kind of migrated away from doing that. However, I still do work in the studio. But my bulk of my income is in training and educating my fellow citizens and training instructors to do the same.
All right, so the first thing on self-defense is, when is deadly force necessary?
Well, that's an answer that's just full of nuance. I can't really answer that question, not knowing the totality of the situation. But essentially, when someone believes that they are in fear of death, great bodily harm, in Pennsylvania, kidnapping or rape, that would be one reason where someone might consider using deadly force to defend themselves.
We know with a lot of laws throughout the states, they look at different crimes as a way to arrest innocent people and charge them with murder when it was clear self-defense.
Well, there's definitely cases where I would agree that perhaps that was the way that it went down. The thing is, people have to understand that being armed is part of it. And, we can't discount how many times law-abiding American citizens avoid being attacked by criminals when they produce that they have the firearm and they show that they have the intent to defend themselves. But it's important for us to be as well educated as we can be. That's one of the things that I really like about the USCCA. Their mission is to educate their members as well as the general citizenry of the United States. If you think of like Andrew Branca, he talks about training so that you're hard to kill and educate yourself about the laws and the legal system so that you're hard to convict. And he has his own little catchphrase. I'm not sure if that was exactly it, but I think that's the gist of it. So I think a lot of times good, honest people might do things during a dynamic critical incident or immediately following the dynamic critical incident that puts them into hot water when it comes to the law.
Right. I've seen cases. I mean, you look at what happened to the McCloskeys out in St. Louis, or Kyle Rittenhouse up in Kenosha.
Yeah, well, with the McCloskeys especially, and I'm not going to armchair quarterback that. I mean, I think we can learn from that situation. The bottom line is this: nobody burnt their house down, and they didn't shoot anybody. So they were armed, and I think that potentially stopped them from getting hurt or their house being attacked. With that said, we can also say that when they went back inside the house to get the guns, perhaps it might have been a better idea for them to stay inside the house and guard the front door, perhaps. But the one thing I will say about that, none of us saw what they saw out in their front yard.
And from the video I saw, there was a lot of people who broke down that gated community on their way to the mayor's house.
Yeah, and then most reasonable people could probably make a good argument that those folks, by doing that, weren't showing that they were all about peace and love.
No.
Yeah.
Then the other case, we got Kyle Rittenhouse, who's being held on a $2 million bond for defending himself up in Kenosha.
Yeah. I have to be honest, I'm not as fully versed with the details of what's gone on with that. But the bottom line is we shouldn't crucify someone through the court of public opinion. The legal process has to do its thing. Quite often we see that's the case, especially with the recent cases of different law enforcement officers, where they use deadly force to defend themselves. And right away, the law of public opinion, or I'm sorry, the court of public opinion kind of deems them as guilty. There's riots and everything. And then once the evidence is presented and the legal system does its deal, a lot of times these people are freed because they were within the confines of the law. So we kind of have to just let those things work its way through and trust in the legal system. But the bottom line is, with us as law-abiding citizens, if there's any way possible we can avoid using a firearm to defend ourselves, then that kind of removes us from that legal situation. Or at least that's the concept anyhow.
Yeah. Now going back to Kyle's case, I do know some stuff from other gun videos I've watched. Basically, he was up there trying to help clean up graffiti and protect a family friend's business when the rioters came.
Mm-hmm.
One guy, he was a pedophile, had shouted, "Shoot at me," wanting him to be shot. He tried to get away. They chased him. He shot the pedophile in the head. And then as he was trying to get away from the crowd, another guy came up, hit him with a skateboard. He got shot. And another guy pulled a handgun out on him. He shot the guy in the hand and the threat. He tried to surrender to law enforcement, but they just passed him by.
Well, based upon what little I know about that and what you just shared with me, I think we can all agree that Kyle is alive today because he was armed. Now,
Yes.
whether he crossed the line with the law and all that, I'm not going to make a comment because I have no idea what the laws are in Wisconsin or how that started up there. But we can't discount that the founding fathers wanted us to be armed, and there are so many occasions outside of these actually, frankly, very rare occasions where, like with Kyle Rittenhouse and with the folks in Missouri, where law-abiding citizens who were armed went home to their family because they produced a firearm when the bad guy threatened to do what they were going to do, and it diffused the situation.
Yeah. And that's why you need to look at cases of self-defense and then realize, you look at places like Massachusetts, Illinois, California, you can still be charged with a crime for self-defense.
Oh, sure. I mean, you in some jurisdictions, you can be charged with a higher crime just because you are a legal permitted person. If I were to get into a shoving match with someone, I might be charged with a different crime because I have a permit, or if I'm carrying a gun, even if the gun never came into the conversation. And that's something that people have to realize. Once you are permitted or you are you're legally carrying a firearm, you may be held at a higher standard when it comes to the law.
Yeah. I've had people tell me, I want a gun for defense. That way I could protect myself. And I've said, and they've also said, I don't want to kill the person. I'd like to give a warning shot to get them to back off.
Well, let me tell you, Joe Biden is not a defense instructor. So his warning shot and kneecap shots are a very bad idea.
Extremely bad.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, along with that, what you're saying there, the whole warning shot idea, you shouldn't get the gun out of your holster unless you are prepared to use it and use it to stop someone using deadly force. If you're not to the point where you feel that you are ready to use it, then keep it in the holster, man.
Yeah.
And even so, I always tell my students, even if I'm here, I still have the potential to not shoot. Now, I'm not going to be here unless I'm prepared to use that gun. I've decided, yes, I am prepared to use this gun, but I can still anytime not shoot. Situations are so fluid, and we could sit here in an armchair and come up with all kinds of different scenarios and stuff. But the bottom line is, if we are able to collect and process information, meaning keeping our eyes open, if we see something that looks unsavory, if there's something going on that could potentially escalate to a point to where we might have to use force to defend ourselves or deadly force, then the best idea is just to avoid that situation altogether. And it's tough sometimes, when that guy cuts you off and you're fighting over the parking spot or whatever, just like, okay, dude, you can have the parking spot. I'm sorry, my bad. And, you have to be the bigger man sometime because you have to understand the weight of the responsibility to carry a firearm. And I will never, well, I shouldn't say never. It's very rare that I will tell someone that I don't think they should carry a firearm. I think it's for everyone if they choose to take on the responsibility. But a lot of times people think it's like this magic talisman that's going to fight away evil, or because they have it, it makes them invincible. Or a lot of good-natured people will say, doggone it, I'm a tax-paying American citizen. If I have to use a gun to defend myself, it's an open and shut case. And we know too often that you cannot plug in information and get a guilty or not guilty out the other side. It doesn't work that way, because so much of what happens depends upon what people deem as reasonable. And what is deemed reasonable in say Cameron County, where I grew up, Pennsylvania, which is in the middle of the woods, what's deemed reasonable there might not be seen as reasonable in Pittsburgh. And you have to accept that. And the one thing that a lot of people don't count is the politics behind it. So, if there's a prosecutor that's politically motivated, one way or the other, actually, but, let's say, for instance, they're anti-gun and they've been running on an anti-gun, or they've been appointed by an anti-gun person, depending on the situation, they're going to try to champion their cause, and they might do their best to do what they can to get that gun owner because they want to stop all those crazy gun guys. And you could see on the other side, if someone is terribly pro-gun, I don't mean terribly in a positive thing, greatly pro-gun, if they're very pro-gun, it's quite possible of human nature that they might be like leaning a little more towards the gun owner, even if maybe the gunner didn't do everything completely right. Well, we did an episode on Meet the Pressers with actually two I'd like to mention. One with Andrew Branca, and we started talking with Andrew Branca about the Zimmerman case, and Andrew said words to the effect that the prosecutor won that case. And we said, well, no, she didn't, because he was freed. Zimmerman's a free man. He says, no, she won it because she got reelected. It was a politically driven case to where she wanted a high profile thing that everyone knew her and she could champion the anti-gun cause, and she was reelected. And it's pretty interesting to look at that. A lot of people discount that political aspect. And I think you're setting yourself up for a fail if it's something you dismiss.
Yeah. And then going back to Kyle's case, that started with Jacob Blake, the guy who stole the car. He had the knife in his hand, and the cops shot him. He survived, but that's what set off those riots up there in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we see that too often. As we move forward into the next year, I think we would be setting ourselves up for a fail if we didn't expect that some things like that would continue to happen, and we need to prepare for that.
Yeah. I usually wait for facts to come out before I would say anything if the cop is in the wrong or right, because you go back to George Floyd, the cop had his knee on his neck, but then I seen where a report came out that he died of a drug overdose, and it wasn't because the knee was on his neck. Now, am I saying what the cop did was right? No. But what I'm saying is, wait for the facts to come out before you get mad, because you could put an innocent guy in jail who didn't even kill him.
Yeah. Yeah, most certainly. I read an article about that too. Actually, Dr. Alexis Artwalt formerly of Force Science Institute, she sent it to me, and it was very interesting. It had all the medical examiner's reports and stuff, and definitely George Floyd had, according to that article and according to the documentation, he had quite a cocktail of drugs in his system. Which one of them in particular, I forget the name of it, but one of its side effects is that it makes the person feel as if they can't breathe. And of course, one of the things that he said that was recorded off the body cameras, I can't breathe, or words to that effect. And that very likely was from that chemical, from that drug.
Yeah. But even so, the cop having his knee on his neck like that, he should have gotten off, and those other officers should have at least pulled his knee off and said, do not put the knee on his neck like that. So he was already down and cuffed.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to comment too much on that because I'm not real familiar with police tactics.
Neither am I.
If he were, see, the thing is too, we didn't see the couple minutes leading up to that too, and oftentimes the media only shows us just one little slice in time, and we don't see the before or the after or what led up to it.
Kind of like the Rodney King case,
Absolutely.
That case, all that showed where it was from the distance where the cops were kicking him, but you didn't see what he was doing.
Right. You didn't see what happened prior to that, and there was a lot of violence going the other direction prior to the clip that everyone saw that pretty much ignited the LA riots. Yeah.
And that's another scary thing, you got all these people who want to defund the police. And then what's going to happen? Crime's going to rise, and people who are going to defend themselves, what's going to happen when they defend themselves?
Well, you see a lot of these, and I'm kind of more of an independent-minded person, called a libertarian or constitution if you want. But you see a lot of these cities that are Democrat-run, and I'm not saying all Democrats are bad, but quite a few of the Democrat-run cities are a mess. and you see how they want to limit the police force. They want to restrict the law-abiding citizens' right to defend themselves. And what does
Yes.
that do? That just empowers the criminals. That all
Yes.
that does is empower the criminals, because any anti-gun law that they pass in the guise of safety is law-abiding citizens are the only ones that abide by the law. So criminals
Yes.
by default are not going to abide by those laws. And if they limit the police and how they can enact the laws that are in place, it's a setup for, rampant criminal activity, man. And it just violates the individual rights and liberties of the law abiding citizen.
That's right. I mean, you look at Chicago, look at Detroit, Baltimore, L.A.
Yeah, and they're trying it here in Pittsburgh. They've been trying for a long time. Peduto passed those laws, those ordinances that would have greatly restricted the rights and liberties of Pittsburghers, and frankly anybody that visited the city. And Firearms Owners Against Crime, we beat them. Our case with Allegheny County Sportsman's League was rendered moot because of the Firearms Owners Against Crime verdict. But we Allegheny County Sportsman's League has appealed that. We're in the midst of that, and of course, the city, being unlimited funds from Bloomberg and some taxpayer dollars, have appealed the Firearms Owners Against Crime case. So we got a lot going on here in Pennsylvania that's kind of hinging on a few different verdicts. We beat the city of Harrisburg as well for a preemption violation, Firearms Owners Against Crime, that is, and we're waiting on a. They appealed that, and we're waiting on a judgment on that. And I think once the judgment in Harrisburg goes, then we'll see the stuff in Pittsburgh come back around. But the bottom line is, with what those cities have done to limit and restrict the rights and liberties of law-abiding citizens, we've got the law on our side. Preemption is very clear here in Pennsylvania that any local municipality cannot pass laws that supersede the state when it comes to firearms and the right to keep and bear arms.
That's right. There's states out there that are passing laws to restrict preemption, letting localities pass what they want,
Yeah,
whatever they want.
which sets up a patchwork quilt of laws from, I mean, heck, if I were to drive to the airport, from where I live to the airport, I would go through literally 15 different municipalities, including the city of Pittsburgh, if I went through that route. If each one of them had their own rules, how could anybody keep up with those laws? How could anyone do that? And, I always promote, as law-abiding citizens, we have to keep up with the laws and abide by them. And the ones that are unreasonable, we need to do our best to work with the legislature to get them changed. But if that were allowed to take place, it would set every law-abiding citizen up for breaking a law somewhere. Whether they cross, you cross one street, you're okay, and then you cross the next street, and now you're committing a misdemeanor,
Right.
or potentially even a felony. And I think that's unreasonable, absolutely unreasonable. And the bottom line is, shall not be infringed seems pretty clear. And here in Pennsylvania, it's even clearer, where it says shall not be questioned.
I think that's the same thing in Maine. That says every law-abiding citizen has the right to own arms, and that shall not be questioned.
Yeah, and ours specifically says for the individual for self-defense too, which is
That's
Article 1,
good.
Section 21. And, that's been in place a very, very long time.
Yes. I'm looking at states now that were once that are still somewhat pro-gun, but have switched to blue, like Virginia.
Well,
Right?
yeah, I mean, Virginia is any one of us, any state in the union could be just like Virginia with one bad election cycle. I think that's fair to say. I definitely can say that about Pennsylvania. Luckily, this last election, pro-gun candidates did very well here in the Commonwealth, and we still have a majority in the Assembly and in the Senate, the state Assembly and state Senate. That being said, it's not a huge majority, but we do definitely still have maintained that majority, which is good, because we have a very, very anti-gun governor who is, quite frankly, anti-liberty all the way around. And if he were to have the legislature with him, we would be in a as bad, or maybe even a worse case than Virginia.
That's the same thing right here in Ohio. Our governor wants gun control now.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
Mike DeWine, he just issued a mandate at that everyone wear a mask when you go out, and if you're caught with that one, they can shut the business down for 24 hours.
Yeah, that just seems to me to be quite a governmental overreach. See, the problem is we have a generation of people now that are supporting these folks who have just turned the age to vote, and they probably just voted in this most recent election, and they've lived their entire life in a post 9/11 society where the erosion, the chipping, and the limitation of their individual rights and liberties is totally fine with them because that's the world they grew up in a post, say, Patriot Act world.
So everything before 9/11 was a post-patriotic, freedom-loving world. Well,
Well,
except
yeah, I mean, the Clinton administration in the 1990s, before I got into the Second Amendment fight, definitely here in Pennsylvania was a rough time when it came for those elected officials trying to limit and restrict the rights and liberties of folks. I mean, that's actually when Firearms Owners Against Crime first came about in 1994. But you look going back, I think there's been several periods where there were erosions, like big chunks of erosions on the individual rights and liberties, especially when it comes to the Second Amendment. And
yeah,
they take advantage of tragedies. We see people, their knee-jerk reaction after Sandy Hook was to limit and restrict guns and take away magazine bans and restricting different
assault
types of
weapon
firearms.
bans.
Yeah, yeah, and we know that that's not going to do anything but affect the law-abiding citizen.
That's right.
So here we are in COVID, where everything is under the guise of health and safety. It used to be just safety; now it's health and safety,
Yeah,
and I just find that to be pretty interesting.
yeah, it's strange. They use this COVID thing as a way to rig the election too.
Well, I mean, I have to definitely believe that that was a huge portion of it because. Well, I would bet 1,000 folding American greenback dollars that had COVID hit a year ago or next year, it would have been handled completely differently.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
because
I mean, here we are in Pennsylvania. We are definitely one of the most restricted states when it comes to COVID, but also with the gun laws. People think that PA is this gun-friendly state, and yeah, we do enjoy a little more liberty than a lot of states. But I believe it. I forget where the stat came from, but I believe we're the ninth most restricted state when it comes to firearm laws. We have quite a bit of unreasonable firearm laws, especially our transportation laws, which are really, really unreasonable. So we've been truly trying to change that. And we've had a couple really good pro-gun bills that came up, and one that was specifically talking about Second Amendment organizations, businesses, and just the right to keep and bear arms to not be infringed by the COVID. Is House Bill 2440. And we got it through the House and got it up through the Senate to where they're going to read it. Now it ran out of time. So we're going to have to start over again from scratch in the next legislative season.
there was a case that I think came out of PA about three young men who sued over their right to carry, and I think that came out of PA somewhere.
How long ago do you know where that was?
I don't know. I seen it on Firearms Policy Coalition
Okay.
just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, FPC has been doing some really great stuff here in Pennsylvania, and we've Firearms Owners Against Crime has been working really, really well with them. Of course, our lawyer is Joshua Prince, and Josh does a lot of work with FPC. So, Allegheny County Sportsman's League, we helped write we helped fund an amicus brief for a recent case, and FPC has been helping us with the fight in Philly and in Harrisburg, and also in Pittsburgh as well. So. Pretty cool organization.
Now, with your somewhat restrictive laws in PA, what are the background check laws like? Are they like California, or are
Well,
they?
interestingly enough, the background checks that are done here go through the Pennsylvania InstaCheck system, which does reference the NICS system, but it's like a twofold process. And we've been trying very hard to get rid of the Pennsylvania InstaCheck system because that does the background checks for the license to carry. We don't have a concealed carry permit. It's called a license to carry. But it also does the background checks for anytime someone wants to purchase a firearm. And the problem with the PIC system is, A, it's terribly inefficient. It's a taxpayer money suck. It's several $1 million a year that we don't need. We could, if we're going to do background checks, we could just use the NICS system that everyone else uses. But also what it has done is, because of how pistols are processed, it is a de facto gun registration. And the laws in Pennsylvania are very clear that a gun registration cannot happen, but yet the Pennsylvania State Police, and by default the governor, has kind of worked their way around that rule with the PIC system, and it truly is a de facto registration. Now, if you ask someone from Pennsylvania State Police, they're going to disagree with that, but everything is traceable through that system. The problem is, too, when it comes to the right to keep and bear arms and people purchasing guns or getting their license to carry, that system crashes constantly. And when it crashes, you can't get your gun or you can't get your license to carry, because you have to run you have to run through that system. And a lot of times, especially during this COVID crisis, where droves and droves of people, new folks, were going to get their license to carry or getting their license to carry from sheriffs here in the Commonwealth. They were blaming the sheriffs for the inefficiency of getting the license to carry, when in fact it was because of the mandate that the Pennsylvania State Police has put in place. So, for instance, if I need to get a license to carry, I have to go to the sheriff. The sheriff has to run me through the PIC system. And while he's running me through the PIC system, their rule is that you have to get a mugshot photo and a digital signature from me that they put into the PIC system. Now, nowhere in statutory law in Pennsylvania does it say that a sheriff has to do that in order for them to issue a license to carry. However, because of the policy in place by the Pennsylvania State Police with the PIC system, they have to do that. So when these systems crash, the sheriff can't give you a license to carry. It's not like they can just write something on a card and give it to you, like the old days. I just watched The Untouchables the other night. We were kind of celebrating Sean Connery. That's one of my favorite Sean Connery movies. And the one bad guy, he had the note from the mayor saying that he can carry his gun. Like those kind of things don't happen. So the sheriff has to issue it, but it has to be run through the PIC system. So that Pennsylvania Instant Check system is not a very good thing, and we need to get rid of it.
Yeah, so like when it comes to private sales, does that have to be through a background check or?
No, private sales do not. Private sales, excuse me, for long guns. Private sales of pistols, you have to take it to an FFL and do the transfer, and they have to run through it. Now, the seller does have some great responsibility doing a private sale. If I were to hand you a rifle and say you want to buy it, I'm supposed to get some information from you. You're supposed to be eligible to buy the gun. So that kind of puts the onus on me to make sure I'm not selling to a criminal. So if I sold a gun to a criminal at a gun show or at a yard sale and they got caught, it would ultimately be my problem. It would be my responsibility because I didn't vet that person was okay to do it. So I do know some people that when they do private sale, they just take it to an FFL and do the background check anyhow to kind of, risk management. I've done very few private sales, but the times I've done, I've just said, hey, do you have a license to carry? And they show it to me, like, all right, cool. So, I might copy down his information in that license to carry and just keep that in my sales record. But definitely one of the biggest restrictive things here in Pennsylvania is the transportation laws. It's very clear we can transport guns from point A to point B, and it's like home to gun shop, home to range, home to gunsmith, home to hunting. I believe those are the four. There might be a fifth one, but they're very specific. So if I did not have a license to carry, if I just took my gun, say I got a new gun, new rifle, and I say, John, I want to bring it over to your house and show it to you. If I took my gun from my house to your house, technically that would be committing a crime because you have to transport guns from point A to point B, and they're specific about it. Now, if I have a license to carry, no problem. It fixes that. It gives me some protection there. But it's point A to point B. So now if I was going to the range, say I'm driving to the range to go do some shooting, and on my way back, I stop and have a cup of coffee, I'm technically committing a crime. So this is even with long guns. So a lot of times people load up their truck in Pittsburgh and they'll drive up to the mountains to do some hunting, and they have the guns locked in a separate case from the ammunition, just like the federal transportation guidelines are. And if they don't have a license to carry and they drive up and halfway they stop to get gas, they're technically committing a crime when they do that. And that's terribly, terribly unreasonable. So, my best advice for anyone in Pennsylvania trying to negotiate that unreasonable law while it still exists is just go get your license to carry. Even if you don't want to stick a Glock down your pants in a holster and carry it every day, just having that license to carry affords you a little more, we'll say, protection from the law if you happen to be, taking a gun from point A to point B.
Right.
Now, with Section 6107 and Title 18 in the Pennsylvania law, the open carry now is limited, restricted, and abolished because of the COVID state of emergency. Now, prior to COVID, the Governor Wolf had put us in a state of emergency for the, quote, opioid crisis. And when we are in a state of emergency in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, open carry is illegal. You're not allowed to open carry unless you have a license to carry. So what made it really sticky during the beginning of the house arrest orders during COVID earlier this year was when all of the sheriffs were not able, for whatever reason, probably because the Pennsylvania State Police and the InstaCheck system were not able to issue license to carry. It made it almost impossible for someone to legally take their guns off their property unless they already had a license to carry. So
Wow.
we've been trying to remove that restriction because, under times of emergency, states of emergency, if you're talking about what we would traditionally think of that, Hurricane Katrina, if there's lawlessness and riots, things like that, that is the time when the law-abiding citizens should be able to arm themselves for their own protection because the cops aren't coming. We saw this with COVID across the country, even before everyone calling to take away the budgets and stuff of the cops. There were several jurisdictions where the police were like, nope, we're not responding for this type of crime, that type of crime, that type of crime. And this isn't a dig at law enforcement, but people have to understand the law enforcement do not have a legal duty to respond to anything. And that's reasonable because if I were a police officer and someone called and I got there 5 minutes late and say for instance, someone were sexually assaulted, that person that got sexually assaulted shouldn't be able to sue the cop because he got there late. Does that make sense? He gets there as quick as he can. So that law is true, and people don't realize that. So really and honestly, you are your own family first responder. That's
right.
it. When I was running with the fire department for a number of years, I was an exterior firefighter, so I wasn't one of those cool inside guys that would crawl around with the masks and tanks on. But we never showed up at a fire as it was starting. Never once. It was always blazing by the time we got there because we actually got there after it started. Well, that's the same thing with cops, and the vast majority of police that I've had the honor to work with are going to get there as quick as they can, and they're going to do everything they can to protect people and intervene. But the bottom line is they can't be everywhere at once. And frankly, I wouldn't want to have a one-to-one police state, one police officer to one citizen. That would be a bad idea. Yeah. So I truly believe the founding fathers meant for us to be our own family first responders. And, that armed and educated citizenry is the true homeland security, but it's also the true check and balance of our constitutional republic.
Yes, it is. And that's why people need to understand when it comes to self-defense, you need to know what the laws are. You need to know when is the best time to use it because you don't just want to go up if somebody's trying to attack you and shoot them, even if you feel threatened, because if they said, oh, I have a knife on me and you shoot them and it turns out they didn't, you could still be charged with murder because you shot somebody who was unarmed.
Yeah, well, one thing that we talk about in the USCCA program, which I really like, is we help our students to try to incorporate it in their plan to not only win the physical encounter, hopefully by avoiding it altogether. I think that's an important thing. If we armchair quarterback a lot of self-defense situations, and you can sometimes look at them and look at that timeline. Now, we have the benefit of sitting here in the comfort of our own home. We're in relative safety here, and these people had to make those split decisions on a second. But a lot of times we can look at some of those and we can say, well, hey, maybe he could have left right there, or maybe he could have not went outside that night, or, we can always look at those things. But if people can open their eyes and look and do everything they can to collect and process information, they can perhaps respond as opposed to react. And if the analogy I use is if I'm sitting at the mall just doing this on my phone, and you come out like 100 yards down by the big fountain or the Orange Julius shop, and you pull out a machete that goes shing, just like in the movies, and you
Yeah.
cross all that distance, and I'm sitting here playing Tetris or whatever, and all of a sudden I feel your blade go into my shoulder, and then I kind of push you out, and I grab my gun and I drive it out, and I shoot you a whole bunch of times in the chest. I say to my students, would I be okay to do that? Would you think it would be reasonable for me to use deadly force when John just stabbed me with that machete? And most people will say, yeah, I think that would have been reasonable. He obviously wasn't there to tickle you. He did physical harm to you. He hit you with a machete. And I say, yeah, I think so. And I say, I think most reasonable people would agree with that. But also, could a good argument be made that if I had just had my head up, had my eyes open, saw you crossing that 100 yards, perhaps I may have had other options than shooting him in the chest a whole bunch of times.
Yeah.
And, so that's kind of the thing we have to kind of look at. If we keep our eyes open, if we know that we have the firearm on us and we know the legal trouble we could get into if we did have to use it, then I think an educated citizen is going to be less likely to use the gun because they're going to keep their eyes open. And in those situations, when we are left with no other choice and fear of death or going to jail is secondary in our mind to the necessity of using that firearm to defend ourselves against an attack that we didn't start and we couldn't get away from, then we need to, defend ourselves with righteous violence and end that situation as quickly as possible and just be prepared to deal with the aftermath. But
Yes.
hopefully in our plan, we've got infrastructure in place where we can help to not only we won that physical encounter, but now we need to win that legal and that social and that financial and that moral aftermath that is definitely going to follow if we use a firearm to defend ourselves.
Yeah. Um, so a lot of self-defense is good, but you also need to know if there is a good way to get away, and that's the best way, is to avoid having to use deadly force.
Yeah, I mean that's the one guarantee. I very rarely will say I guarantee something, but I guarantee you will win the encounter that you avoid. Someone told me the other day, well, what if I'm out walking my dog at midnight and I get jacked up? And I said, I tell you what, if you don't go out at midnight and walk your dog, you will never get jacked up at midnight while you're walking your dog. And it seemed like kind of a silly answer, but it's true. A lot of times we put ourselves in situations that maybe aren't the smartest situation. A dear
Yeah.
friend of mine, he has season tickets at the Pens, at the Igloo for the Pittsburgh Penguins, and those are not cheap. Season tickets are not cheap, especially for the Pens. But to stick it to the man, he knows a place up in the Hill District, which is right near where the Pens play, which is traditionally not a very safe part of town. And he knows a place in an alley behind a dumpster where he can park his car and he doesn't have to pay for parking. And so he, to stick it to the man, after the games are over, he walks up the street and goes up into a, not so pleasant part of town. And he's potentially putting himself at risk. Because if he were attacked, would he have the right to defend himself? And, of course, we'd have to know what the specifics were. But generally speaking, yes, you have the right to defend yourself. However, did he put him into that situation by making a poor choice? And I think someone that can afford to buy Pens tickets, season tickets, can probably afford to pay the $8 to park in the well-lit parking garage and not have to put themselves potentially at risk.
Yeah. We Next topic we'll just go over some of the different carry insurance companies. We already talked about USCCA. What other companies are out there?
Well, I believe there's, I certainly know there's U.S. Law Shield here in Pennsylvania and CCW Safe, I believe. I'm a big fan of USCCA. I think they all offer something that is good for a citizen. But the one thing I like about USCCA is not only do they offer that member back benefit of the legal protection, the finance for the legal protection, but they also issue so many educational opportunities, whether it's learning the law and lots of defensive courses. Of course, I'm a little biased with that because I teach so much of their curriculum. I train other instructors to teach it as well.
Yeah. Because I hear a lot of good things about USCCA. People are saying join the USCCA. So they have to be the top best carry insurance company out there.
Well, I think so. I've been a member of USCCA since 2013, I believe. So, I'm pushing 10 years there, and I thought it was really a fantastic idea when I first heard about it. The educational opportunities, the fringe benefits. Uh, there's just so many reasons why I believe the cost of admission, if you want to call it that, is worth it, even if you never use the member back benefit of the legal protection. But man, if ever we had to use a firearm to defend ourselves, how bad would it be to have to sell your home to be able to defend yourself in court? One of my
Yeah,
instructors that I trained actually to teach the USCCA program, he was involved in a dynamic critical incident a number of years ago, and he was ultimately cleared, but it cost him upwards of $85,000 for the legal system to go, yeah, okay, you're good. And I don't know about you, John, but 85 grand would probably devastate me to the point where I'd probably have to move in with my sister-in-law or my mom. That would be pretty bad. That would be sell your house kind of time.
yeah,
And having some type of backing like that, again, I'm a huge fan of USCCA, but it's a free market economy, man. People need to do their research and choose what's going to work best for them. Any one of these organizations should help them in that situation to where they wouldn't have to sell their house to defend themselves in court.
yeah. And people always think, well, if I have to use a gun to defend myself, it'll be clear. But like we said, they'll look at the case. They can go, okay, this person was a threat, but he was not technically armed. He might have said, "Oh, I have a weapon in my pocket." You shoot, and it turns out he's not armed, and then they can go, "Well, he was unarmed, and you just murdered him. You
Yeah,
told me you had a weapon."
Yeah, one of the things I see, especially here, where people kind of misread the law, is with castle doctrine and stand your ground, and it's not called castle doctrine or stand your ground. It's not what it says in the statutory law, but essentially, you have certain justifications in Pennsylvania for use of deadly force to protect yourself or someone that you love, or someone that you believe is in fear of death, great bodily harm, kidnapping, or rape. And that doesn't mean that you can do it. A lot of times say, like, someone breaks in my house, I can shoot him. Well, no, not necessarily. Depending on what the evidence is and what you say to police, you're going to potentially have justifications, but it's up to the prosecutor to kind of knock that wall down. So it's like, I know this is normally wrong. I did this, but it's okay because of X, Y, and Z. And a lot of times people think that that's like a free get out of jail card. And even if you can legally shoot someone in your home, even if the evidence and the story leading up to that does give you that justification, man, if you can avoid doing it altogether, that's a better idea.
Yes.
Especially in the home, having a plan to evade, barricade yourself, and then guard that door, get 911 on the phone, and then when seconds count, police are minutes away. But if I can
Yeah.
buy police minutes so they can do their job, man, I don't have to shoot someone in my house. That's a win for me and my family.
And it's also a win for the other guy because then, yeah, he's going to go to jail, but maybe he'll think about what he did, and then upon release, maybe he'll get his life switched around.
Yeah, and that's a thing too. People have to people have to realize that. When we call if we can call the cops and the cops can take care of the situation and they can take him into custody, then nobody dies. That's a win for the world,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I would like to avoid having the dead guy room in my house. I think that's something I would like to avoid having. So, and you think about it too, if we can evade and barricade in the home, we'll talk specifically in the home, and we can guard that door. Well, from a tactical standpoint, then the bad guy has to come to me. He has to breach that door, and I have the tactical upper hand there. So I
Yeah.
don't recommend that people, ever go through their house clearing their house. That's a bad idea. Police, law enforcement, they're trained to do that, and they don't do that one at a time. They wait for
Yeah.
backup. There's a system for that. And it's a very nerve-wracking thing to do, as it's reported to me. So I don't think that anyone should do that in the home. The only time I would ever, condone going through your house with a gun is when you're getting from where you are to where your family is. And I think
Yeah.
that's different than going cutting pies and clearing rooms and stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think we just basically covered everything. Would you like to tell people how to get in contact with you?
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that. My training company is Trigger Pressers Union. You can go to my website and see my schedule and what I have going on. I've got lots of videos and articles. I'm a contributor to Personal Defense Network, so I have all those articles linked on my website as well on the library page. That's on triggerpressersunion.com. That's triggerpressersunion.com. You can learn more about National Train a Teacher Day on nationaltrainateacherday.com. Firearms Owners Against Crime is foac-pac.org. And of course, check out Meet the Pressers on YouTube. That's Meet the Pressers with Matt Mallory and me. It's been a couple weeks since we had an episode out with the election and all the things that have been going on. I did some road teaching, and Matt's been busy teaching, so we haven't had a episode out for a couple weeks. But we're going to do one. I believe we're going to do not a live episode, but a live to tape episode with Frank Tate. We're going to be doing some training out in Philadelphia area, and we're going to do an episode with him coming up. So we got some cool episodes coming up, some cool guests.
Yeah, I only came across you guys because you were on Coffee with Craig a couple weeks ago. Actually, it's more like a month or so ago. So yeah, that's another guy I like too, is Craig, getting
Yeah.
that news out as fast as he can.
Yeah, he's a good guy. I've had the honor to just kind of hang out with him a little bit and do some work professionally, and he's definitely someone that I look forward to working with again.
Oh yeah, he has to do the fight behind the lines. He's in one of the worst states when it comes to gun laws.
Most certainly. Yeah, I lived in California for a number of years working in the recording business, and it was bad then, and it's like much worse now. And I left in
Yeah,
2010, so yeah, he's definitely fighting a very uphill struggle.
yeah. Well, you take care, man.
All right, well,
I'll have
thank you for
to.
your time.
Hey, no problem. I'll have to get you back on the show again soon.
Hey, anytime you want to, feel free to let me know.
All right. Take care, man.
Take care.